Probably the number one question I've been asked in recent years is, I've got a Nokia 808 PureView, what should I replace it with? I've usually muttered something along the lines of keep the 808 or try a Lumia 1020, but it does seem that with this, the Galaxy K Zoom, the confirmed smartphone shutterbug may have gotten the device of their dreams. Well, almost. This is me and nothing's perfect, as you know, sigh. It's still a stunning redesign of the S4 Zoom concept from a year ago. It's better across the board, with the main improvement being a form factor that's actually pocketable, being 15mm thick for much of its length, and with the camera hump fairly smoothly integrated. There's still no mistaking this for anything other than a camera-centric phone, but at least it is a phone, whereas last year's S4 Zoom was far more evidently a standalone camera bolted onto the back of a phone. The idea is the same though. Take the guts of a Samsung £100 or so camera with optical zoom here, OIS and proper Zenon Flash, and somehow integrate it into a modern Android smartphone. And the K Zoom succeeds where the S4 Zoom failed by being smoother, thinner, faster, better built and more highly specified on the phone front. That's not to say that there aren't issues here, but the K Zoom is a more credible drop-in replacement for a traditional Android smartphone. And it feels great in the hand too, despite being a typical Galaxy all-plastic design, from the pocketable and hand-friendly size to the faux metal outer rim, from the high-density polycarbonate frame to the removable, beautifully textured, ultra-grippy rear cover. It's worlds away from the tackiness of the Galaxy S3 and similar models. There are no creaks, no weaknesses, and it's hard to see how the K Zoom's construction could be improved. The star feature, the integrated 1/2.3-inch sensored camera with integral 10x optical zoom, is well positioned, with curves in the rear cover making the camera zoom mechanism appear as slim as possible. The concentric circles of the zoom are indeed slimmer than in the original S4 Zoom, and it's really rather remarkable when watching the lens system extrude from the K Zoom's body and wondering how it all fits in. Here it is zoomed in, especially leaving room underneath for the main 4.8-inch AMOLED display. Let's try and retract that lens. There we go. Impressive though all this is in terms of fooling the eye and the hand, the K Zoom is still resolutely chunky by modern smartphone standards at around 19mm at its thickest point. You just have to bear in mind that A, there's a very, very good reason for this thickness, and B, it feels very comfortable in the hand. Sometimes ultra thin can be less comfortable. Just ask any Xperia Z owner. Continuing my tour around the K Zoom hardware, we have a proper Zenon Flash here inset into the back. At last, as I've often ranted, Zenon Flash is the key to being able to shoot photos under all light conditions and however fast moving your subject is. Manufacturers have shied away from Zenon, claiming that the bulb and the capacitor are too bulky, too costly and too power hungry. I can see their points, but the technology makes absolute sense here and lets the K Zoom compete in social situations with many standalone cameras, even maybe DSLRs. The physical shutter button is overlarge and wonderfully sprung, with a light touch focusing and a firm press taking the shot. And in conjunction with the volume up button can be used to launch the camera from a locked phone state. I'd have preferred a simple long press on one button, but maybe Samsung know best here. Also nicely implemented is the main home button, beloved of Samsung. On the likes of the Galaxy Notes and S series of devices, you get something with quite a bit of wobble and travel. Here on the K Zoom, the travel is deliberately limited and the button is more stable and satisfying as a result. As with the recent Galaxy S5, the menu control is now recent apps, a change which makes more sense in these days of Android 4.4 and hamburger ... menus and slide out panels. Plus, long pressing the home button brings up Google Now, an assignment which works intuitively and which I was very happy with. Also noticeable on the hardware side are the 2430 mAh removable battery, always reassuring to be able to pluck such a battery out if something goes wrong or to extend device life. Plus a lanyard attachment point here, though you have to provide your own lanyard. Stereo microphones top and bottom provide exceptional audio, assuming they've used the same components as the S4 Zoom, for example during video capture, even at concert volumes. And the mono speaker located just above the camera hump is really good in both quality and volume. This is max volume. I suspect it's the same component as in the Galaxy Note 2 and S4 that we all love. Plus a micro SD slot hidden here under a flap. Now this is important, as you might expect, given the camera-centric nature of the K-Zoom. You'll be wanting to capture stills and video to a sizable card, and with the flexibility to take the card out and plug it into a printer or laptop or projector or whatever. Actually, it's not so much want as be forced, since Samsung only supplies the K-Zoom in an 8GB variant, meaning 4GB or so are free out of the box and only 2.5GB free after you've installed a typical set of applications and got everything synced up and running. This should rightly raise warning flags for anyone with experience of Android. Now, a few gigabytes is fine for casual apps, but it's going to disappear in a puff of smoke if you start installing any sizable games which aren't perfectly behaved in terms of their limited micro SD use. Not that a typical mobile gamer would also be a confirmed shutterbug or vice versa, so I can see what Samsung was thinking here, but the smaller internal memory capacity seems a cost-cutting measure too far. Also a cost-cutting measure perhaps is the use of a pentile 720p display. Now the resolution itself isn't a problem at this screen size, but the pentile system in which alternate pixels have red or blue subpixels but not both is an issue. Text looks slightly, well, fuzzy, games aren't quite as clear as they should be, and there's a general feeling of underachievement in the display overall. The effect isn't a showstopper though, and Samsung will point out that pentile AMOLED displays generally last longer in terms of brightness than RGB versions, but who are they kidding? It's all really about build cost here. The K-Zoom though is all about the camera, which is good because it's generally excellent. Still images at 16MP and 16:9 mode are detailed and comparable in quality to the best of Android at the moment. And that's before you factor in the Zenon Flash for evening indoor shots, as I say, unique in the Android world right now, and most of all, before you factor in the optical zoom facility. Now, underestimate optical zoom at your peril. Take any scene or subject you care to snap and then look at it. There's a good chance that you wanted to get closer to some degree. And on most camera shots, all you can do is take the photo and then crop it down later, ending up with a perhaps 2MP or 3MP shot that's perfectly framed. With optical zoom, you go straight for the framing and the degree of closeness you want and snap that as a fully detailed 16MP shot. Once you've tried it, you'll find optical zoom addictive. Almost every shot benefits from some zoom. Now, optical zoom has two big disadvantages. Well, for a few, also include cost and the durability of the moving parts. As the zoom extends, the amount of light that can be gathered up towards the sensor is reduced. So in theory, zoomed shots in poor light might show greater noise. In practice, the K-Zoom's image processing seems to handle this very well, and any noise increase in the resultant photos is negligible, amazingly. The second disadvantage is the extra physical bulk, of course. Several centimetres of extending plastic and glass have got to live somewhere, making the Galaxy K-Zoom all about the balance between thickness and zoom. Do you need zoom in your smartphone camera? If so, put up with the extra half dozen or so millimetres, even contracted, and move on with your life. If not, then the K-Zoom isn't for you, and you'll be better off with the Galaxy S5 Mini to be announced shortly. The same kind of thinking applies to the Zenon Flash, of course, and if, like me, the thought of optical zoom and Zenon Flash in the one phone excites you, then the K-Zoom is pretty much a shoo-in. Results are pretty good in practice, as you can see here, with my only complaint being that colours can be a little muted and fully automatic mode and subjects overexposed. Thankfully, you can set the program shooting mode up how you like it. For example, with exposure notched down and colour saturation cranked up, and this is remembered for the next time you come to use that mode. Now, hopefully a firmware update will tweak the default imaging algorithms in due course so that full auto produces better results. In fact, there's a vast amount you can fiddle with here, from everything you'd expect, exposure, ISO, white balance, sharpness, saturation, contrast, to ProSuggest, imaginatively named, predefined combinations of settings compiled by Samsung and other third parties, and all available for download in a free directory online, plus the usual Samsung camera modes, including shot and more, burst mode effects, beauty face, HDR, which works brilliantly, panorama, night mode, which combines multiple images to average out random noise and produce really clean results. Phew, the most powerful camera phone ever created? I'd say yes on balance, dethroning the Nokia 808 PureView shooting this show, with the caveat over the extra camera bulk and the earlier firmware here. Video capture also makes excellent use of the optical zoom, as you can see here, with the OIS making perfect sense to produce great results even when zoomed in by 10 times. Away from the camera, the K-Zoom is a pretty fast smartphone, even in the 2014 Pantheon, with an Antutu benchmark score of 33,000, which puts it only fractionally behind the flagship Galaxy S5 and Note 3. 2 GB of RAM is perfectly sufficient for this 1.7 GHz combination quad-core dual-core chipset and for the 720p display, meaning that everything's very snappy, all running on the latest Android 4.4.2 KitKat. TouchWiz in its current form is generally bearable as an Android skin, though I'm not convinced that Samsung has ironed all the bugs out yet. Netflix wouldn't work properly, I had occasional spurious SD card removed errors, plus the auto brightness was all over the place, especially after taking a shot with Zenon Flash. Off to the left of the home screen, My Magazine, first seen on the Galaxy S5, is effectively a customised version of Flipboard, which is also embedded in the firmware and can't be removed, so presumably the two are effectively one under the hood. It works quite well. I use it as something a little different to dip into when I want to change from my personal activities. The Android notification shade here is the usual excellent Samsung carousel of quick settings, but is somewhat polluted here by a pair of big buttons for S-Finder, a local search utility, and Quick Connect, a wizard for getting your phone hooked up with other network devices. Both are valid things to include on the phone, but there's no way that I can see to remove the big buttons from the shade. I slightly resent the space they occupy. As usual, TouchWiz offers the chance to hide applications you don't want to see in the main app list, so there's not actually that much to hide here since Samsung has been quite restrained. Group Play for sharing content with others on the same network, Samsung Apps and S-Voice are the only really obvious Samsung insertions worthy of possibly hiding, while My Galaxy is a door into your own online warranty, and Galaxy Essentials, the latest list of Samsung apps that you can grab if you really want them, is actually relegated to the menu here in the main app list. Third-party license extras include Studio, a hub for photo and video editing, and the ubiquitous Dropbox. Some duplication exists as usual in the main app list, with Internet and Browser and Chrome vying for browsing duties, while Google's new Photos system, which integrates local and cloud image content, vying with Samsung's slightly more device-focused Gallery. Still, both are important areas of functionality, and I guess a user can simply use the one they prefer. Otherwise, this is a modern, fast, Android-powered smartphone with a colourful 4.8-inch display. That it's rather thicker than the norm is the price you pay for the camera capabilities, but I can't emphasise enough that the basic curve of the back is actually a very good fit for the human hand, and the only real problem will be is if you have an issue with the extra 4mm or so for the large camera concentric zoom rings. In today's thin-as-in phone landscape, the K-Zoom here is a niche device, to be sure, which is a shame since even casual users might have their imaginations fired up by the possibilities of using what's effectively a decent standalone camera in their always-with-them phone. With zero effort, it's possible to zoom in and out and find new subjects. With zero effort, the Zenon Flash will help Android users take great snaps of moving subjects indoors and at night at last. As a huge fan of the now obsolete Nokia 808 shooting this, the K-Zoom comes as a breath of fresh air, even if it's not perfect, bringing similar ambitions and lack of compromise into the 2014 Android world. Maybe this is roughly where Nokia would have ended up for its imaging flagship, at least if it had turned to Android 3 years ago instead of Windows Phone. Like the Nokia N86, the N8, the 808 and 1020, the K-Zoom is potentially a classic device for anyone who prizes good imaging in a smartphone. New firmware is needed though, so a little patience will be required. The K-Zoom's sales figures are unlikely to set the world on fire, yet every time you use it and the lens mechanism extrudes from your phone, jaws will drop and you'll get some great images at the same time.